washed up on some sort of deserted island, but there's a shack up ahead, so that'll be kind of useful. Ah, yes, an abandoned shack. I've been training for this moment my whole life.
Hey everyone, Ben here from 𝙋𝙊𝙍𝙍. I hope you're well. In today's episode, I'm finally going to be discussing Survival Kids, a game that I've wanted to cover for over 3 years. And we're going to get into what I thought of it, finally playing it all the way through, which is something I hadn't done before. Is it worth it for you? Is this a game that still holds up well in 2025? Well, since it's just recently been added to the store on Nintendo Switch Online, it kind of forced my hand to make this video. I've been holding off and waiting to get the right video, get the right footage, but it's happening now. We're doing it now. So, without further ado, let's talk about Survival Kids. In the beginning of Survival Kids, you start the game as a 10-year-old child, boy or girl, depending on which you choose, and you are gifted a pocket knife by your father on a boat trip. Unfortunately, the boat runs into some trouble and you end up marooned, washed ashore on a remote and mysterious island. Now, your goal is quite simple. Separated from your parent, separated from anything really, you have to survive and ideally escape the island. But you're a 10-year-old child, and that comes with some problems. So in order to stay alive, you're going to have to manage a few things. You're going to have to manage your hunger levels, you're going to have to manage your hydration levels, and you're going to have to manage your fatigue levels. If you get too tired, you're going to start taking life damage. If that runs out, you die. If you get too thirsty, you're going to take life damage. That runs out, you die. If you get hungry and that runs out, your health bar goes down, then you die. And you do die. In the game's first area, you're met with a very, very non-existent soundtrack. You just hear the roar of the ocean's waves as you're stranded on a beach trying to work out how to get off the beach. And that's kind of the first puzzle of the game. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but you can get off the beach. Once you do get off the beach, however, the game opens up as you start to explore new areas and find a hut in which you can survive in. Like all survival games, the biggest issue is always going to be at the very beginning. If you've played Ark, or if you've played Minecraft, if you've played any of these type of survival games, you know that when you have no resources, building a system where you start to get resources is not only the most important thing that you can do, but also kind of the hardest thing you can do. And I think the same is kind of true with Survival Kids. Until you find your feet on how to make it through day to day, making sure that your water is topped up, making sure that you've found food, making sure that you're well rested, once you've got those things kind of covered, that lets you explore the island more fully and work out what's going on from there. Now, just like Minecraft and those other games I mentioned, you can craft. And the crafting system in this game is both ahead of its time and also terrible. And I'll explain why. Even the guidebook inside the game, you would expect the guidebook to perhaps have a list of different combinations of things that you can make. That was kind of a classic thing that old guidebooks used to do, is they used to give you key piece of information. In fact, reading the manual that came with the game, especially for a lot of older games, was the only way you could work certain things out. And if you didn't have a game box, sometimes that could be a problem. So if you're playing Metal Gear Solid 1, where you actually needed the game box in order to do part of that game, where you had to find a codec number. It's quite clever. Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is, back in the 90s, in physical media, the manual wasn't just some booklet that said, you know, health and safety issues or like basic controls. Manuals back in the day used to have a lot of key information inside them. However, that's not the case for Survival Kids. Survival Kids does have some key information in there, in the sense of the general structure of the game and, you know, understanding what the HUD is, because you don't necessarily know that H stands for hunger. You might think that's health. You don't know that L stands for life, and you don't know that F stands for fatigue unless you read the manual. Anyway, where I'm going with this is the crafting system doesn't have any real information in the book. So what you do know is that you can merge between 2 and 3 items together to get a new item. And if the item can't merge, it will just do nothing, basically. So this means that you're going to keep finding things, and you're going to keep going, oh, I'm going to have to keep testing all these different combinations in order to find something that works. So you find a mushroom and you find a stick, and you're like, I'll mix the two together. Do I get something? You don't. But then maybe you get like some sap and a stick. You mix it together and you get a torch, and you're like, cool. The crafting system is semi-intuitive. This is good. This is a good thing. But then you get a stone, and then you get a stick, and you mix them together, and you get a baseball kit. And you think to yourself, okay, this must be something that I'm going to need. This has got to be this must be an item that I'm going to need. This must be an item that's going to be important. Well, it's not. Another problem with survival kits is there are a bunch of items that you can craft, therefore they use up the materials to craft them, that have no in-game effect. With the baseball kit, when you use it, it says, this is a baseball kit. Shame I'm bad at baseball, or something like that. It does nothing. It has no purpose in the game. Now, my argument always was, wow, if you make a baseball kit, that should be something that builds you morale. Because if you look at the logic behind why a child might pick up a rock and a stick and go, ooh, baseball, literally just to play, isn't it? Well, when I was a kid, I would find stuff, I'd pick like a stick that's shaped like a gun. Amazing. That's now a gun, and I'm happy pretending it's a gun. Or a sword-shaped stick. Brilliant. I now have a sword stick. Fantastic. I'm going to whack some bushes with it, or some other things. But with this, it does nothing. It takes up inventory space. It used up items to be made, and it provides no value. And that is one of my biggest gripes in survival kits, is the ability that you can make these items and they have no value. If they did morale, or if they had some other use, I actually would flip round my opinion to being like that this is genius. You're a 10-year-old child. Of course you're going to play if you get the opportunity to play. Even if you're miserable and you're in a survival situation, you find a stick that looks like a gun, you're still going to be like, this is a cool gun stick. You know, or a sword stick, or whatever, right? So yeah, that did bother me a little bit. That's just a little gripe out of the way, a little mini rant.
Pixel.
So once you've managed to work out how to get a steady food supply, managed to get water, managed to realize that you either have to sleep in a hut or you have to sleep outside in the outside huts with the little small shacks with a fire in order to not get woken up by animals. What was that sound? Animals nearby? If it is, I'm in trouble. I better stay awake. Boy, am I sleepy. Just passes out! Incredible. Whoops, fell asleep without knowing it. No, it doesn't feel like I slept a wink. Yawn. Must do something in case they show up again. Hey, I heard that animals are afraid of fire. Maybe starting a fire would do the trick. You don't say. Once you realize all these things, and you're then able to start exploring the island without the fear of just dying. So you explore the island, you realize there's all these different areas. There's a jungle area, there's a swamp area, there's an infinite forest that you have to work out a puzzle in order to go out one way or another. There's mountainous regions, there's a desert. The game's incredible for diversity of locations and for the sheer amount of items that you can find and collect. And then it comes down to, how do you get off the island? Well, that's the thing. This game, one of its strong points, in my opinion, is the fact it has 8 endings, 8 different endings. This is a Game Boy Color game, sandbox survival, with crafting, and 8 endings. That already sets this way above its league for a Game Boy Color game. You know, for a Game Boy Color game to have that level of content. So Survival Kids, you're going to be wandering around, you're going to be finding mushrooms that you don't know what they do. They'll say question mark, because until you've eaten something, you can't tell whether it's good for you, bad for you, really bad for you. You won't know. And it's a trial and error thing. I quite like, because you're a 10-year-old child and you do not know which mushrooms are edible or not unless you are a very well-educated child in those specific fields, which I don't think there are many 10-year-olds that know a catalogue of exotic mushrooms. There's probably at least one, but it ain't this kid. So anyway, in my playthrough, I managed to get to a scenario where I could leave the island. I could make a raft and I could sail away from the island. So that's what I did. I started gathering the materials. I threw it all together into making a raft, and I was curious. I was like, oh, I want to take a bunch of food with me, though. I want to take a bunch of water with me. I don't know how long I'm going to be on the raft for. So I stocked up on food. I stocked up on water. I got on my raft. I sailed out to sea. And then I had a cutscene where a storm rolled in, smashed my boat to bits, and I ended up on a new piece of the island, but without any of my food or water that had all been removed from me, and a bunch of other key items that I really needed. And I had to start from scratch again, but in an unfamiliar part of the island, and I really loved that touch. And apparently, that's one of the variant endings. Had I have not had plenty of food and water on me, I would have got one of the endings, which is essentially that you go out on the raft as a child, and you starve. You starve and die out at sea. But because I had enough supplies, I got a different branch point of the story where I end up shipwrecked on the northern part of the island. So if you've been watching the Twitch, which you might not have done, not many people do, I have uploaded the full VOD now of my entire playthrough of Survival Kids. I think it's 9 hours long. You don't have to sit through 9 hours of it. You don't even have to sit through 1 hour of it. If you just want to skip through parts, you can, or not even watch it. It's up to you. One of the major flaws of Survival Kids, and I have to talk about this, is how convoluted some of the puzzles are. There's a specific point in the game where there's a crack in a waterfall, and it says, I could break this. Basically. I thought, okay, I'll bring the hammer I'd made, and I'll try that on the cracked waterfall. Didn't work. I tried tons of different strategies, methods. Nothing would break that waterfall. And I had to look it up online because I just could not work out. And what it meant was, above the cracked waterfall, there was a rock. And apparently, if you made a bow, you could shoot an arrow into that rock with enough force that you would shatter the rock and shatter the waterfall. Bear in mind, at no other point in the game have you needed to break a rock with a bow. And bear in mind, after this, there is no opportunity where you can break a rock with a bow. So this is a one-off, just crazy thing you wouldn't even necessarily have thought of. Like, oh, he doesn't mean the cracked waterfall when it says, I could break this. It means the rock above it. And by I could break that rock above it, instead of trying to find a path down to the top bit, it means craft a bow and arrow and fire an arrow at the rock. There was no way I was ever going to work that out. I'm not even entirely sure how people did back in the day. I suppose they probably just tried everything in their inventory and someone happened to have a bow and then they told other people and eventually that became, you know, the story of how to do it. And there was a couple of puzzles like that in the game that were very convoluted and I did have to look things up, which was annoying because I kind of wanted to do the whole game without any prior information. But there were a few things that I just wouldn't have worked out. And that's a shame, but it's an old game and it's a trendsetter, so I do allow it to have some flaws, same as the original Pokemon games had flaws and the original Survival Kids has flaws. There's always going to be a special place in my heart for survival games in general. It's something that I loved as a kid growing up. I had a Coleman's SAS Survival Guide. I read that through back and I read that a few times actually. And I really enjoyed the concept. I don't know why I would enjoy the concept, because the reality is if you're trying to survive, it's probably a bad scenario you're in. But I really like the idea of being functional and able to survive with everything taken away from me. And Survival Kids is a nice little window into that. Nice little window into the difficulties that we take for granted, right? So you go home, you turn on your oven, you put in your food, Well, you didn't have to source kindling, you didn't have to get wood and build a fire, and you didn't have to even source the food. A lot of the times we go into a supermarket, we pick up some meat or some vegetables. You didn't have to grow or source the vegetables, you didn't have to go look for them. You didn't have to hunt down the animal or rear the animal and then process it in a way where you could eat it. And it's a nice step back from everything that we have and looking at how difficult things could be. And overcoming those things in the order to survive. So if you do get the chance to play Survival Kids, I highly recommend it. Make sure you have a guide at hand because some parts are pretty tricky. And I am back, by the way. I had a bit of a break. I messed up my hand. You may have saw in my YouTube post I made on the channel. But yeah, everything's fine now. We're all back to normal. Back to usual schedule. Maybe. Possibly. Hopefully. Oh, before I go, I named my monkey Meat. And you'll know why if you watch the video. If you watch the VOD. Link in the description. Down there. Somewhere down here. Folks, I'm so low on health, I haven't got time for your... Well, we're dead. Fucking mauled.